trying to figure out where the turbine goes, and these are the stock rails. I have extended them a little bit. They ended over here, and I cut this off just because of the these bolts on my KingTech 180G2. First of all, this doesn't actually fit where I want it to go. It's just too wide. You can see it's already contacting the fiberglass here. So I'm going to lay this flat on that rail, which I would have expected would make it match up perfectly with the pipe. Now let's go look at the pipe real quick. If you look at this, maybe not so clear in the camera, is that the turbine is sitting pretty low in the pipe, as in it's not centered. That's actually much narrower distance as opposed to the top. You can see there's a much bigger gap at the top than at the bottom. But what I found is that when I add blocks of wood to the rail so that the turbine sits up top, then it's perfectly centered. So maybe it's just how the hype pipe was designed, but let me show you what I'm talking about. I've added that block of wood and opposing one on that side, and those blocks of wood are about 6.7 millimeters thick. And so with those blocks there, now I have enough room to actually get my 180 into this spot right here where it doesn't actually contact the, you can actually see I can move it down. So there's a bit of an air gap between the engine and the fiberglass. Not that that's a problem because this is the cool end anyway, but it would just be difficult to fit this engine without those blocks. Now let's go to the back and see what's happening. Look at that engine. Still, it's a bifurcated pipe, so we're looking at it from an angle. But this to me looks like a much more even gap all around. So you can see that it looks like, even as I move the camera up and down, that the engine is sitting perfectly centered now with those blocks up in there. So to mount these rails, I'm going to be using Type 3 wood glue because this stuff is going wood on wood, and whereas I could use epoxy, since I'm not in a rush and I have some time to let this cure, I'm just gonna go the wood glue route. We want a nice solid connection, so I'm just gonna move that around. I have my marks in here. I'm trying to line up this end with that edge. Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure that everything aligns correctly again before I clamp this down. But alright, so now that I'm satisfied with the alignment of these wood blocks, I'm gonna clamp them down. And as I'm clamping this, I'm watching for any tendencies for that wood block to slide. It did slide a little bit, so I repositioned it correctly back again. So I'm happy with that, and we're just gonna let this sit like this for at least 24 hours and then come back and move on with our turbine mounting. So here's what the turbine setup is looking like. Doesn't seem like there'll be room for a bypass on the bottom at all. It's pretty tight in here with this 180G2, but I'm just glad that it fit, and I may have to apply some BVM ceramic coating on the inside, on the top, right up here. But other than that, looks like we're gonna be able to use this turbine no problem. Okay, so what I'm doing here is trying to position the pipe exactly in the center. So you can see these two pieces of plywood that I have placed shimmed or wedged in between the pipe and the mount. I had measured these mounts pretty precisely, so I'm fairly confident that if this pipe is in the middle of these openings, it's going to be properly centered. So by doing that, I'm making sure the pipe is centered. So now I'm gonna go ahead and screw these down. I've also verified that the measurement on the back side of the turbine is exactly what I want, as in how much of the pipe sticks out in the cones. So we're going to secure this down and then show you what that looks like. To secure those guys, I'm going to be using the same RTL fasteners, 2x7/6 silver mounting screws. So push the turbine as far back as it'll go, and the reason I'm doing this is to try and figure out if the spacing between the pipe and the cone of the turbine is exact. And what I can see now is that if I look at the engine from the back, it feels like the pipe is just a little bit lower, so down that way than it should be. What I've come up with is these two washers. I think this will be exactly what's needed to just bring that pipe up just a smidge, because it's really off by just a little bit. And once these go underneath the holders of the pipe, it's going to raise the pipe out maybe 1 or 2 millimeters, and that should give me what I want. So one more thing I added is this block of wood. What I noticed is that in spite of the pipe being secured by these two ears here, it still had a tendency to move up and down just a little bit. And so what I did is added this block, and by adding this block down here, that actually is going to stabilize that movement. So I'm going to glue that in place. Just use probably CA, because I want to be able to take it out if I need to. But that way, now this pipe is going to be supported both up and down and left and right. It is mounted. So I used 4 wood screws, so 2 on each side, to hold the turbine. And then in terms of spacing, so between the end of the tail cone right here and the beginning of the pipe is about 1/2 inch. So I think that's perfect spacing for that, and I am pretty happy with that. Next thing is obviously going to be cables, and because of how this turbine had to sit with the fuel line in the middle right here because of the wheel wells, the fuel line goes all the way underneath, and then we have a cable, data cable on this side, power cable on that side, and data cable through here, and that's pretty much it. So moving forward, we got this mess to deal with, secure everything, and determine where all of my components are going to go.